Hi there and welcome to Q&A Wednesday. Well, we have a great question for today. It's a basic one, but it's really important when we get to the beginning of the year and we start with these New Year's resolutions because of course nutrition is such a huge part of reaching our health goals, right? I didn't know that starting out of the box, and when I was a much bigger girl and I'd go to the gym and I'd do my 30 minutes of cardio, I'd slink in and slink back out, and nothing would ever change, and I could not figure out for the life of me what I needed to do different. Of course, now we know, or at least I know, that nutrition plays a much, much larger role. And I find it fascinating that a lot of times I'll ask a new client or somebody that I'm doing a goal assessment with, okay, well, what do you know about macros? And they get this blank stare in their eyes, like, I have zero idea what macros are or what they do. And I think that's really essential to learning to live a healthy lifestyle, is knowing what types of things you should be eating and why you're eating it, what they do for your body, because of course your body treats different foods in a different way. So we're gonna talk a little bit about that today. We're gonna talk about what macros are, what they do for you, how much you should be eating of each. And of course, you're going to hear quite a lengthy, extended version of what I think you should be doing. Not really. And then whether or not also carbs are something that you should be cutting out. Now, there's a couple of situations where it probably is a good idea, but we're going to talk about that in just a bit. So let's talk about what macronutrients are. Macronutrients are the three main types of foods that we eat. Of course, we're talking about proteins and carbohydrates and fats. And they each do different things. So your proteins, of course, are your muscle build and your muscle maintenance. And of course, these are a little generalized, but I mean, it gives you enough information that you'll get it, right? Your carbohydrates are your energy source, right? That's what makes you be able to function on a daily basis. It also helps your brain actually function and do what it's supposed to. So, it's important. Your brain actually needs a certain amount of glucose in order to function well, but you can get that from multiple sources. So we'll talk about that again as well in a second. Also, you need fats, because fats do multiple things as well. And most of us remember, at least, have kind of seen the side of the low-fat craze that started about in the early 90s. Huge disservice to the health in the United States because of course, low-fat was really not the way to go. There was no actual research behind that. And then, of course, it became a staple of teaching people high-carb, low-fat, which for most people is just totally not appropriate. So fats definitely, though, are important. They do different things for you. They help you absorb vitamins. They help your body to actually utilize the different nutrients, and it also helps maintain your hormones. So, people who go super, super low fat on a regular basis tend to see some definite side effects from that, and that's not really a smart way to go. As a matter of fact, the benefit of healthy fats is that they make you feel satiated. There's definitely major benefits of that. But of course, on each of these, the biggest issue is there is a quality issue, right? Eating an apple and a Pop-Tart, while they might both be carbohydrates, are not the same they're not the same product, because of course one has way more nutrients and vitamins and minerals and also fiber that slows down the absorption rate of those simple sugars in that apple, while a Pop-Tart, mind you, I love Pop-Tarts, is basically empty food. It's void of all nutrients. Now, a lot of those processed foods will say, has added blah, 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 fiber. Doesn't matter. First of all, that's synthetic. Your body does not utilize it the same. And number two, that doesn't negate the fact that it's high in sugar and refined products. So again, they're not all the same. And that's super important to know, because when I get people that say, well, maybe I should do keto, maybe I should cut out all carbs. No, cut out crap. That's not all carbs are created equal. And when you start cutting out the complex carbs, now examples of complex carbs will be things like potatoes, sweet potatoes, rice, just nothing instant, right? Now rice can tend to, that kind of borderline, but there's things that are definitely full of vitamins and minerals that we need, that we do ourselves a disservice by completely cutting them out. Now, if you're talking about cutting out the carbs such as, sugars and candy bars, obviously by all means cut those out. Never ever is a processed food a total healthy option. I don't even care if it's labeled, it's a protein ice cream. It's still processed. So your body actually treats those foods a lot differently than it will whole, clean, unprocessed food. So keep that in mind. There is no loophole. There is no product that's going to be a healthy option. Now, I mean, sometimes I'll use tuna packets when I travel, or maybe a protein bar, but to me, those are not plan A. Those are plan B and plan C. And those are kind of, oops, I don't have enough food. But I don't use those on a regular basis just because I know they're not the healthiest version of that. So difference between complex carbs and simple sugars. Now there are even, fruits that are turned to simple sugar pretty fast, but in general, the biggest difference is that complex carbs contain more fiber that slow down the absorption rate of the sugar into the bloodstream. And of course, doing the kind of the loop-de-loop on the blood sugar. So, if you find that you're eating, say, a bagel in the morning and then you're crashing in a couple of hours, that's because it runs through your body so quickly, and it has to deal with it in a completely different way than it will, say, like I said, fruits. So, for those of us that tend to be a little lower carb, I get the majority of my carbs from vegetables because a lot of foods kind of cross over, right? Avocados are both healthy fats, but it also contains some carbs. So, you're still going to get some of those carbs. Now, of course, like I said, they each do different things. They're metabolized differently in the body. That's why we can't focus solely on just calories. There's no benefit to that, right? Because in that thought process, 100 calories of lettuce is going to be the same as 100 calories of Oreos, and that's not true. We know that. So those macronutrients do make a big difference because, again, they do different things. They're metabolized differently, and it really depends on what your goals are as to how much of each of those that you should be eating. So we'll talk about that in just a second. But you do have to remember that, your body, again, doesn't need calories per se. It needs the vitamins, the minerals, and the nutrients that healthy food provides. So when we say that, empty calories, we really mean that. You're getting calories, you're retaining that because technically it's a source of energy, but your body can't use all of that quick crap, right? Your body has to do something with it. So what does it do with it? It stores it in body fat. So that does become the problem. So let's talk a little bit about how much of each. People say, well, what should my breakdown be? What percentages should I be? What ratio should I use? Well, it really depends on your goal. For somebody, it really does. I use completely different formulas depending on where they're starting from, what their current body fat percentage is, and where they want to go. Think about it. Somebody who does a ton of cardio, maybe they're a marathon runner, or maybe they are doing some sort of a sport where it's a lot of energy output. They're going to need higher carbs because otherwise their body will not work as efficiently by only providing their body, say, fats and proteins. So the carb content is going to be really super important. Now, whether or not they need quick carbs or slower digesting carbs also depends on what they do. And there's still always going to be better options than, right? Any type of rice is going to be better than a candy bar. So, that can be adjusted depending on how quickly they need that energy and what their goals are, what their overall energy output is. So somebody who is trying to lose weight, which how I feel about that, it's more about fat loss versus weight loss, they need to actually eat less carbs, right? Because if you're giving your body all the energy that it needs through carbohydrates, your body has no reason to tap into your fat stores in order to use it as fuel. So not maybe, when I work with someone who's really trying to lose fat, we tend to bump up their proteins a little bit, lower their carbohydrates, and of course give them some moderate fats because that will help with satiation. And think about that. When you eat highly processed food, there is nothing built in there that actually triggers satiation in your body. That's why it's so easy to eat so much of it, right? Maybe you ate a huge steak for dinner and maybe a baked potato, which, baked potato it's a carb, it burns a little quicker, but maybe you're so full, but then somebody offers you some ice cream. Man, you can eat that whole pint, right? It's just because your body just doesn't get those, it doesn't get what it needs in order for the hormones that tell you you're full to actually be processed and tell you you're full. So, that's super important. By eating clean, it's very, very difficult to get fat eating solely clean, healthy food because built in that food is your body's ability to say, I just don't need any more of that. Now, like I said, depending on what your goals are, you break down the ratio, which is different for everybody. But in general, it's really hard to overdo it on clean, healthy, whole food. Now, if you're wondering what that is, I know sometimes that's hard to figure out, but I tell people if you can't kill it or grow it, you probably shouldn't be putting it in your face. Anything with more than 3, 4, 5 ingredients, especially if it has additives and preservatives to make it shelf stable, is not a healthy choice. It's just not. I'm not saying you should never eat it, but those are the things that you really should use in moderation, not on a daily basis. And, growing up, I didn't realize that. Nobody taught me that. I ate stuff on a daily basis that I would never, at this point, with the knowledge that I have, I would never do that again. So, again, you just have to educate yourself. Avoid the garbage, guys. There is so much misinformation out there. It's so frustrating. So if you really aren't feeling like you're getting in the right direction, maybe you think you're eating healthy, you might need to speak with a professional who knows a little bit more about nutrition. They can at least guide you and educate you and get you going in the right direction. So back to how much you should be using. Again, somebody who is trying to build muscle and build it quickly actually needs to increase their carbohydrates, not their proteins. Your body can actually break down protein and utilize it as energy. It can break it down through its own metabolic pathway and create glucose. So in order to not do that, in order to make sure that our body is using those amino acids from the protein in order to build muscle, we have to give it enough of the carbohydrates so it's not stealing from the protein, right? We want it to do what it's supposed to do in that purpose, which is to build muscle. So it's actually more carbohydrates, not necessarily more protein that people need when they're trying to grow muscle. So you kind of see how it's really difficult to do a blanket statement of you need to be using this much, you need to be using this much. There's also genetics involved. So for me, I already know that my body quickly builds fat if I eat too many carbohydrates. And we're talking even healthier versions of carbohydrates. My body will pack on the fat really super fast. That's my genetics. So I know that in general, I tend to be a little lower on carbohydrates unless I'm really, really focused on building some size at the current moment. So again, keep that in mind. All right, so let's really quickly back up a second. In general, people want to know how much should they be doing. Now, we've just talked about how to break it down. Again, if you're not sure, definitely get somebody who is educated. And don't just go to a registered dietitian. Get someone who really, I shouldn't say that because I know that they've had a lot of education in it, but I've actually known several registered dietitians that I really struggle with their knowledge because they're still promoting that high carbohydrate option when I really think that is a huge disservice to our country. The fact that we've misled everybody for so long on, well, just eat low protein and high carbohydrate and throw some fats in there. Well, no fats are bad. Come on, guys, let's use some common sense alongside that. Those different macronutrients are there for a purpose. And if you know what you're supposed to be eating and why, it makes a huge difference. And like I said, if you keep it clean, it's really difficult to put on a lot of fat when you're eating clean, healthy versions of that. But let's back up for a really quick minute and talk about overall how much you should be eating. Well, there's something called a resting metabolic rate, which just means if you don't get out of bed during the day, you are still going to burn calories. Now, a little bit of this is really hard to pin down because genetics, age, your activity level, there's a lot of variables that play into that formula that I tend to use for new clients, well, for every client. So it's hard to maybe just figure it out yourself, but you can start with your resting metabolic rate. There are calculators on the internet that you can hop on there. You can enter your age, your gender, and it'll kind of spit out a basic number about what your resting metabolic rate is. And then there's some different things that you can add and try to figure out according to how active you are during the day. If you sit at a sedentary job, you probably don't want to eat as much as somebody who is on their feet all day. Like I don't sit half the day. I'm up and moving, and I don't tend to be very sedentary, so I probably eat more than the average person. I also have more muscle than the average woman, so I kind of need to eat more food in order to support that because I don't want my body to break down that muscle as fuel. So that kind of is a basic starting point. Again, it's hard to just give blanket statements because I don't cookie cutter anything that I do. It's just not. It's not smart, right? There's no common sense to that. So kind of take all that information, break it down, and give it to each person as we go. Now, I know a lot of us are using apps, which are great. I think tracking is important, especially if you need that accountability. I learned a lot when I very originally started tracking my food. Very quickly learned that I was obviously eating too much in the way of carbohydrates. I learned that everything contains added sugar, almost everything processed contains sugar. And so things that I used to think were healthy, wow, at this point, I know that those things are not healthy. Come on, guys. Fruit snacks, just because it said fruit, there is no fruit in that stuff. None. They might say fruit juice. But again, you're getting the sugar part of it anyway. So tracking is great, but be careful when you input your goals. I love MyFitnessPal. It's what I make all my clients use. I love it because it's free, it's easy. But what I don't like about it is that when you enter your information towards your goals, it goes with a super basic algorithm and it spits out numbers that aren't appropriate for everybody's goals. So most of the time when people hand me their original goal on MyFitnessPal and I'm looking at them like, okay, that's way too many carbohydrates. Again, it's not taking your very specific goal into consideration when it spits out those numbers. So, keep that in mind. And you know what? The best way to decide whether or not it's working is, are you moving in the right direction? I mean, if you've been, checking your macros and working on it for quite a while and nothing's moving. Now, again, you know how I feel about the scale. The scale is not the end all be all, but maybe, your pants are feeling the same, your energy levels maybe not quite where you think it should be at that point. Of course, it's easy to overestimate how quickly we should see results, but you should be seeing something if you're going the right direction. Now, if you're getting there too fast, I know that sounds like, Melissa, really? Is that a problem? Yes, because again, we're not trying to ruin your metabolism at the same time. And if you eat not enough, if I read something the other day and it says, eat as much as you can that still is getting you towards your goal. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's the best thing I've heard, because it's the smaller the car, the smaller the gas tank. If I have somebody who starts at 250 pounds and they start out eating 1,200 calories, where do they go when they drop down to 200 pounds? I can't go less than 1,200 is already the minimum amount of calories a person should be eating in order to not have severe consequences of starvation. So I don't even know where we got that number. Like, it really makes me angry because I don't eat 1,200 calories ever. Now, we can talk about intermittent fasting and some other things another day, because there's really too much behind that. Not to say that they're not the perfect option, but those are definitely some things that people can do. But low calorie diets, like really, really ridiculously low calorie diets, are not appropriate for anyone. Again, there's too much science behind it. Believe it or not, low calorie diets and intermittent fasting are two totally different things. Intermittent fasting definitely has benefits. The low carb or the low calorie, starving, believe it or not, your body will treat that as starvation, while intermittent fasting is not. So I find that fascinating. Let me back up really, really quickly to talk about who might benefit from low carb diets. And again, I don't like diets. I call it a lifestyle, because whatever you do to get where you want to go, you have to keep doing to stay there. There are some instances where low or no carb diets are super appropriate. I really believe that anyone with type 2 diabetes or a definite metabolic issue, insulin resistance, I think that you would benefit from going extremely low carb. Now, again, that's not low calorie. And again, everybody's different. I am also not a doctor, so please do not think that I'm telling you to run out there and try it. I really don't like diets in general, but because insulin resistance is because we're taking in too many carbohydrates and our cells have literally no more room to accept the glucose, by backing off the carbohydrates, your body will become sensitive to the insulin again. So again, there's so much behind that. I can't give you all that information at the moment, but just know that in some instances where people are extremely obese, extremely overweight, or really struggling from some pretty severe symptoms from that type 2 diabetes, that might be an appropriate place to do a lower carb diet or even intermittent fasting. But you really do got to know the science behind it. You got to educate yourself before you jump into that, or work with a professional who really knows their stuff. That is super, super important. So let me give you a couple of tips throughout this. Like I said, eat clean. Eat clean is super important. Honestly, your body, if you eat clean, your body will let you know when you are full. Right? So for those of us that are like, oh my gosh, I am the bottomless pit. Not if you eat clean food, right? Because it's built in. What you need is built into that food that will trigger your hormones to tell you you're full. Eat to avoid deficiencies. Don't focus on sacrificing and pulling stuff out of your diet. Eat to actually get the nutrients that you need, the vitamins, the minerals. When people struggle with, there's so many issues that can come from nutrition deficiencies, and just the gut health. Your gut needs that, those vitamins and minerals in order to function properly. And when we're not getting them because we're eating too much in the way of highly processed, empty calories, you're not going to feel good, and your body is not going to function at its best, right? And I don't know about you, I want to feel good. That's probably my number one goal when it comes to eating healthy, eating clean, and working towards my health goals. Yeah, I want to look good and I want to, grow muscle and all that. But number one, I want to feel good and I want to have energy. Those are my two big goals. And that's important to me. And it should be important to you. So I like to use a healthier version of kind of the if it fits your macros. That's why I like talking about macros. However, I'm not a fan of the original diet per se, because thereby people say, okay, well, it's ice cream. It's a carb. It fits my macros for the day. You can't have those loopholes, guys. You still have to, what that just means is you need this many grams of carbohydrates for the day. What can you do to fulfill that? And it allows for a little more flexible eating when you use if it fits your macros. You know what? I'm a creature of habit. I do all of my prep work all at once. I don't want to change my food on a daily basis. Hey, Shane. Because I don't have time to cook like that. If I want something amazing, I save it for my free meal, which is, if I get the meal for the week that I can have what I want. I don't do cheat meals anymore. I do free meals. Cheat meal kind of allows you to go off the deep end and pretty much derail everything you've done for the week or weeks preceding that. So I like the if it fits your macros. If you're keeping it clean, that is a great option. It really kind of helps you to focus on what your goal needs, not just what you're hearing from there's so much noise when it comes to health and nutrition. Everybody's different. Please do not look up what so-and-so did on Instagram and think that it's going to work for you. Number one, do they have your body type? Have they had kids? They probably haven't. You had. That's not going to be the same option for you. Is it somebody who is, they're 20 years old and their metabolism is through the roof? I heard that there's some guy on social media is kind of a catch-22 because I know we need it, but it drives me crazy. But apparently there's a guy who gets on there all the time and talks about how much crap he eats, but he can get ripped. And I'm like, yeah, dude, you got the genetics. So good for you. Talk to me in 25 years when the doctor's checking out your heart and it's full of plaque and garbage. Again, there is no loophole. You got to do what's best for you. That's the most important part. Not best for everybody else. Stop comparing yourself, right? And again, last tip, if you really are not sure which direction to go or what to do or where to start, please seek a professional. Again, I love the education of it. To me, nutrition is a hugely interesting subject, especially because I have a practical application to use it. Again, not a registered dietitian, but I work with people all the time to coach them on how to eat healthier, better, and work with their body. So if you have some issues that might play into that role, I've worked with people with Crohn's disease, PCOS, you name it. If I don't know about it, I read about it because I don't ever want to give information that's misleading, and I don't ever prescribe anything. I might give some suggestions, but I always, if it's something that's out of my scope, I tell them to go somewhere where they obviously are going to get professional information, somebody who is much more educated on it. But it's okay to start with somebody who can at least get you going the right direction. And again, don't take advice from anyone you wouldn't switch places with. I'm finding quite frequently that a lot of my clients will come to me and say, well, so-and-so said that I should be eating less protein. That's way too much protein. I'm like, would you switch places with that person? Do they look like you want to look? Well, no. Then why would you listen to what they have to say? That one blows me away. I could spend an entire hour about people who think they know more than they really do. But I'm going to tell you, again, I don't know everything, but I can at least get you started the right direction. So please, you guys, leave your questions and comments below. I get my best ideas from you guys. I just figured this was a good one to start the new year out with because, I think there's so much garbage on TV. We kind of got to get it down into the science and think about what our body really truly needs. So that was kind of the idea of tonight. If you need any more information, you can always message me directly. I love working with everybody and I love hearing from you. So have an incredible week and we'll see you next time. Bye now.